Next, we have our very first panel discussion for today, led by Mr. MALIKKHAN KOTADIA, a global digital banker, a fintech mentor, and a passionate blockchain evangelist. Malik will be leading the panel on governments taking over blockchain. What lessons can be learned from it? So, please put your hands together and give a warm welcome to Malik and our distinguished government panelists.
Good morning. Good morning. How's everyone today? Day 2 of BlockShow during crypto winter. All well? Okay, so we have a very, very distinguished and a very diverse panel here of experts. I know government is not a very popular word when it comes to the maximalists, but as we will hear from them, there are a lot of interesting things which regulators, policymakers, government leaders from around the world are doing. And it's my pleasure and my honor to have such a diverse and distinguished panel here. So without further ado, let me just start with each of the panelists doing a quick 10 to 15 second introduction about themselves, so you know whom you are kind of discussing with. Jason, we start with you. You probably need no introduction, but still.
Sure. Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Jason Shi. I'm a member of Parliament and a legislator from Taiwan. You can call me a crypto congressman because my mandate in the parliament in Taiwan is to develop progressive legislation for cryptocurrency and blockchain. So I focus on removing any legal barrier for technology and innovation. And recently I set up regulatory a sandbox and a self-regulatory organization. Now I'm working on the very first security token offering regulatory framework in Asia.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is RIKA Khurdayan. I'm an STO attorney based out of New York. Very excited to join the panel. And my specialty is really security regulations in the US. SEC regulatory compliance. We work a lot with projects on structuring and launching security token offerings in the US. We also take funds through tokenization process. And a big talk of the town, of course, is asset tokenization, and we're working on quite a few exciting projects in that regard. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Giang Le. I work for the Ministry of Justice of Vietnam. My mandate right now is to prepare legal framework for cryptocurrency and crypto asset. I also help government to draft regulation and advise in enforcing the regulation as law. And my pleasure to be here to discuss with you about how the technology can help the innovative transformation, not only the blockchain and other technology.
Good morning, everyone. I'm MASTURA. I work with Might Malaysia, a consultative platform between the government and the private sectors. And I'm in charge of blockchain and DLT.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Josephine, and I'm with the ASEAN Business Advisory Council, which is composed of 30 council members representing the 10 ASEAN members' businesses, from the smallest to the biggest. What we've done in the last 15 years is to push for more harmonization in business for ASEAN. But particularly in the last 18 months, it's digitalization of micro enterprises and linking them to the big businesses. My day job is that I have a digital payments company based here and in the Philippines.
Thank you, everyone. And we'll certainly look to draw upon all your experiences and expertise. We have ASEAN well represented here. We have North Asia and, of course, the US as well. So let me start with something which probably is, the elephant in the room. And I have been fortunate to be speaking at BlockShow for a while now, since the earliest days. So I have seen how this show has evolved and how the whole mood in the ecosystem has evolved. And in fact, the theme of this year is making blockchain mature, right? So there was a time, probably same time last year in Singapore or elsewhere in the world, when you attended blockchain conferences, the typical mood or undercurrent was, it's about decentralization. Why do we need any central authority? What is the role of governments in something like this? So governments back off, don't kill innovation. From there to now, we have come a long way, and I'll not touch upon any of the corrections which have happened. Enough speakers have spoken about it. I will try and draw upon the panelists here to share what governments are actually doing when it comes to blockchain, not just talk, but walking the talk. And for that, I actually want to start with, I'll go the other way around. I'll start with you, Jopin. Given that it's been 10 years since Satoshi's first white paper, and about 3 years or 4 years since blockchain entered what I call mainstream consciousness, and we've seen the whole hype cycle. We've seen the blockchain or crypto winter, so we've seen all the cycles associated, hype cycles with any disruptive technology. Given this evolution, do all of you, and I'll ask this question to each of you, but my request is to keep it brief. Do all of you believe that the blockchain ecosystem is ready for regulations, for government intervention? If not intervention, at least government oversight? And if so, which areas should government or policymakers get involved with? Which areas should they lay off from?
Right. Well, yes, I think so. I used to be with government myself, but it was governance where you are an enabler rather than a regulator or controller. So I think, yes, when the hype is all over, when the party is over, it's time to take stock as to what needs to be checked and what needs to be encouraged. So it's in the Philippines, outside that as an example. Our central bank and the SEC are working very well together to push for blockchain technology use by all institutions, private or public. Cryptocurrencies, the word is out that yes, they encourage it, but they encourage the private sector to be the one to take it on. And there are a lot of uses, but particularly for countries like us, it's small transactions, because the race to zero cost of transaction is really very fast already. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you. MASTURA?
I think so far, the Malaysian government has been involved quite extensively, but in a light touch kind of way. For those who are interested in cryptocurrency and the financial side of things, of blockchain and DLT, that's good news. In budget 2019, our government mentioned that we are going to regulate cryptocurrency space. And as well as yesterday morning, Securities Commission announced that using blockchain in OTC market has been successful. They call it Project Castor. And in terms of non-financial industries, I would say there is actually a real use case that has been successful, which involve, surprisingly, the central bank. It's called Malaysian Motor Insurance Pool. It's for uninsured or high-risk public transportation. And we have a company called VTOS that's working with them, employing telematics as well as blockchain technology to make insurance affordable in that sense. So I think these are, I'm not talking about POC, yes. We, as a government, we are, encouraging all our GLCs and others to use it, but we are also going beyond that now.
Thank you.
In Vietnam right now, one of the priorities of the government and Communist Party is to help the economic growth. And recently, the government and Communist Party, they produced some resolution about economic development, in which the government and Communist Party recognize that we should foster the innovation and application and environment from the technology. But in the resolution, there are no specific mention about blockchain, because at that time in my country, blockchain is not very popular. The government and people starting to consider blockchain in 2016 or 2017, when we see a lot of crime and problem with Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency. But thanks to cryptocurrency that right now we are paying attention to blockchain. But blockchain cannot stay alone. We need other technologies which should be associated or integrated into system. So right now we are trying to build a strategic plan on how to exploit the environment of the emerging technology to help countries to have the economy.
Thank you. Rika, you come from another geography, and as we were discussing earlier in the morning, the US perspective is fairly different from what it is in either Southeast Asia or even North Asia. So enlighten us and our delegates here on how, whether the state governments or the federal government and the various agencies are looking at blockchain, and who's having what kind of jurisdiction or domain, and where do we stand end of 2018 getting into 2019?
Sure, I would love to address this. So the US has taken a slightly different position from many countries, and instead of adopting new regulations governing the blockchain industry, what we've done is we've applied our existing regulatory frameworks to this industry. And of course, the main regulator has been the SEC and the CFTC. The regulator that might not be so much in the public eye, but that has been very active in this space as well, is the FinCEN. So all the three agencies are actually working together quite well, and I think the industry in general is very ripe for regulations and regulatory oversight, and I wish our industry have proved regulators wrong in their desire to regulate it, but what we've seen on the market in the past year and a half, the rise of ICOs, the amount of fraud on the market manipulation, it actually showed that the industry is ready to be regulated, needs to be regulated, and if we want adoption on a more massive scale and on a global scale, it has to be regulated. So my exposure to the industry, of course, is from the capital markets perspective, and it's very exciting for me to see how the infrastructure is developing, not only in the US, where we have an already very good and established framework of how to raise money and how to raise money using blockchain as a technology, but I'm actually very excited to talk to all my panelists and people in the audience about how this industry is developing outside of the US, what strides have been made to look and adopt a security token framework, and how the regulatory environment is developing in Asia.
Thank you so much. And finally to you, Jason, last but certainly not the least, you are seen as one of the most progressive voices in government anywhere in the world when it comes to blockchain. At the same time, you are also a fierce proponent of and champion, and we've discussed this several times on panels together, of very robust governance and policy framework, so that the whole ecosystem doesn't become its worst enemy. You've brought a lot of landmark bills in Parliament, and you're working on some more of them. Please enlighten and share with our delegates here on some of the things which you think have worked very well, some of the initiatives you are trying to work on, and also your learnings and maybe some setbacks along the way.
Sure. So this year marks the 10th anniversary of Satoshi's white paper. And if you think about it, Satoshi's vision was really created at a time when financial crisis was at its peak. It was at a time when the heavily leveraged financial institutions were working to basically put Main Street people's money and out of the reach that they can take. So Satoshi's vision, if you think about it, what had happened in the last 10 years, there is a fundamental philosophical shift of understanding how money works. And I would say for the last 10 years, this community has achieved this goal, this milestone, that is somehow to rewire the concept of money. And I have seen this manifested in all different corners in this industry, going from the investor, going from regulators, going from the entrepreneurs. I myself, I am an entrepreneur turned legislator. So the way I figure things out is, how do we ensure that when something disruptive, a disruptive technology is introduced, public policy can be ready and somewhere in a system, some sort of sandbox or some sort of exemption or experimentation can be enabled for innovation take roots. So if you think about the whole crypto industry and the way how blockchain is evolving, we've only scratched the surface. Technology-wise, there's a lot to overcome. There's a lot of restriction, constraints. If you were to ask any central bank, why wouldn't you use blockchain to enable payment? And they would ask you, it's ridiculous because of the scalability issue, the security issue, and then etc. But in the deep of their minds, they are just afraid of admitting that this is going to be something they have to deal with. But now I would say, even though we've entered into this kind of winter bearish market, but I would say this is a good thing. Reason why this is a good thing is the last 12 to 18 months of craze of ICO have finally come down to a rational stage. Now it is for regulators to really sit down with the industry, with the community, with the lawyers, with accountants to figure out what works the best for the industry. And I would say the year 2019 will be the year of the reasonable regulation. And we need to work together to nurture this. Because otherwise, we'll see this industry go down. And there will only be very selected few people benefiting from this. And I would say, the year 2019 will be super important. And what can we do as a regulator? I would say learn from the industry. And regulators must evolve as the technology evolves. Their regulatory innovation must be introduced to the ecosystem. So that is why I created a self-regulatory organization in Taiwan, and I put forth a sandbox, fintech sandbox regulatory legislation, and then etc. But overall, I feel two things are important. Number one, patience is needed. And number two, communication is needed. Patience is needed on both sides, most on the business side and also on the regulatory side. And also the communication is important as well. We need to understand this industry from its fundamental value. That is that we've created internet. And so what is internet? It's a communication for all. But I think crypto is a value for all. And if we can all work together to achieve that vision, I think we will have a long way to go. And we're just beginning to march together for this long journey. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jason. And very, very passionately articulated. As always, as you can see, the audience loves it. All of you said some very, very important and interesting things. And from my own humble perspective, just to add my perspectives, I don't think a winter is necessarily a bad thing when it comes to any disruptive or emerging technology. Everything has to go through a hype cycle. Come to think of it, it was in the winter of the internet, the dot-com era in the 99, 2000, 2001. People were talking about the same thing for the internet. It's going through a rough patch winter. The hype cycle is over. This is going to die. And look how Web 2.0 evolved after that from 2003 and 4. And it's completely transformed our life. So the one statement that always guides me, and I have spent 20 years in digital banking, so I come from an incumbent background as well as a disruptive background, so to speak. And this one statement, Ambara's law, always guides me, which says that we tend to overestimate the impact of disruptive technologies in the short term, but always underestimate it in the long term. So as you said, patience is a very important virtue. And when somebody asks me about whether blockchain is going to achieve its potential, as WEF said, of having 10% of the world GDP on blockchain, I said, you can't ask this question for 2019 or 2020 or even 2021. Ask this question in 2030. And that's the time frame we should be looking at, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and not, the internet has gone through the same cycle. So thank you everyone for articulating it. I want to now go a little deeper, and I know the clock is ticking. I want each of you to share one or two key use cases that your governments or your government agencies are actually implementing or trying to pilot in your respective markets. Let's make this a little more real for our delegates, because I want them to leave this room with an impression that governments are not the opposite party or the opposing party, but they are enablers and they are collaborators in this journey. So please, each of you, maybe we'll start with you, Jason.
Yeah, sure.
Share one or two things which your
Sure.
governments are doing.
So the way I position Taiwan is, I position Taiwan as a blockchain tech hub and a crypto nation. And I do three things. And by saying these three things, I want to invite all of you to come to Taiwan and to explore the opportunities and the businesses there. Number one is we are now creating a new business category for blockchain and crypto related business. And this will be done under Ministry of Economic Affairs. This will provide blockchain and crypto business legitimacy to operate. And number two is we are now working to issue what we call a blockchain visa with a quota of 5,000 technology visas that would allow you to do business, make investments, hiring people easily, and all your data will be stored on blockchain. And number three is we've already incorporated cryptocurrency into Anti-Money Laundering Act, which means that our Ministry of Justice and our FSC, SEC now have a pretty good knowledge of some of the negative aspects of this industry that might happen and have taken necessary measure to address it. And then what we are doing now is we are working to provide tax breaks for the industry so that the industry can work together with the government to figure out what sort of tax package is needed. How do we tax exchanges? How do we incentivize industries? How do we make sure average citizens' money is securely protected? And how do we make sure consumers' data is protected? All of this is part of the very important conversations that we are having. And lastly, and also I feel this most importantly, government should be doing is to enable more use cases and widespread industry adoption for blockchain technology. Blockchain is a answer back and forth question. And the issue that I see around here is that there's a very little adoption and also use case for this technology. In Taiwan, we are creating Blockchain Center of Excellence, by which we identify blockchain technology clusters. We now begin with 4 clusters. Number 1 is blockchain and medical services. Number 2 is blockchain and logistics and supply chain. Number 3 is blockchain and financial services. And number 4 is blockchain and IoT, transportation, and smart cities. And all of this, what we are enabling is enabling technology to happen and to influence, to maximize its effect in your daily life. And we want to make sure that crypto is just like, things that you can use in your daily life. It's not something that only very selected few people have knowledge of. We want to make sure that, little payments is enabled, in the street corners and a convenience store. In Taiwan, you can buy Bitcoin in a convenience store. You can pay for your beers at a bar with a Bitcoin. So all of this, what we're trying to do is that we want to ensure this is a lifestyle. It's not a secret. It's definitely not a cult. It should be a lifestyle that you trust and that you enable and the government encourage. So that's what we are doing in Taiwan. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jason. You covered so many aspects and you almost gave an overarching view of Taiwan's vision for blockchain, and there are quite a few takeaways, but the one important thing which stood out for me is when you articulated those 4 use cases, and I just want to reiterate, as the other panelists will also probably attest to, that blockchain is much more than just tokens or cryptocurrencies or dealing with financial services. You spoke about health records, logistics, so much stuff and so many industries can be enabled or disrupted by blockchain. So let's continue on this. Rika, perhaps you can share some of the emerging use cases or the interesting ones from not just the US, but probably North America.
Sure. Well, first of all, I want to say that it's really fascinating for me to learn what has been done, outside of the U.S. in Taiwan, and I had a chance to discuss it with MASTURA yesterday. All the progress that has been done in Malaysia and in other countries on actually adopting the technology. and using it in things like logistics, transportation, insurance. It's really fascinating. My exposure to it is really from financial services and capital markets perspective. And it's very exciting for me to what this, this technology can do to capital markets in the future and where we're heading, and the opportunities it provides for capital raises on a global scale. From the use cases, I guess some of the recent news from our side of the world is a few states are really closely looking into adopting blockchain technology for different processes within the states. So just last week, the state of Ohio said that they would start accepting payment of taxes on the blockchain at a corporate level. A lot of states are looking into implementing blockchain for managing and recording property records. So definitely a lot of things happening, not only in the US, but around the world.
Thank you. And I think one of the interesting things in the news recently from the US was a voting trial pilot on blockchain, right? I forget which state that was, but Minnesota? Voting. There was a trial done for actually holding mini elections and voting on the blockchain too.
Yeah, a few states looked into it. I think it was Arkansas and a couple other states, but it hasn't moved really into adoption yet.
We can get some more perspective from what's happening in this part of the world. Zhang?
I totally agree with Jason about 2019 going to be the year for the regulator and business to sit down together to discuss how we can embrace this technology to improve our life. And the role of government will come into twofold. The first is how government can exploit, can apply the technology to improve the efficiency. And the second is how the government will regulate and guarantee the market. On the applicant side, I see a huge potential for the government to use the technology to improve their service. For example, land registry. Land is very important property for any people all around the world. And with blockchain, land registry can have the transfer of ownership from the people to other people safer, cheaper, and more reliable. But there are some problems with the land registry if the only blockchain that we need the intervention from the government, because there are difference between the ownership and possession. We may transfer the ownership on blockchain easily, but to really exercise our possession, you may need the guarantee from the government. And the second thing is from the regulation side, when the government, when and to what extent the government should intervene into the market. I don't think that the government should make regulation to require the markets or business how they make the product, how they produce the service. The government should intervene when there is some problem with the market. And if the best thing government can do for the market is the government will guarantee the own transaction and recognize the asset or property that's based on blockchain and other technology. That's the best thing government can do for the markets.
Thank you. So we've heard about medical records, we've heard about logistics, we've heard about voting pilots, and now we've also heard about land registry. Thank you. I think these are bringing blockchain applications and government interventions to life. MASTURA?
Okay. I think for Malaysia, we started looking at it from probably a slightly different perspective, in the sense that we realize blockchain is a part of this decentralization trend globally. And it's just a part of a host of technologies, digital technologies, that's going to what they call a perfect storm, because they will converge with each other and create something that we probably have not seen yet. So rather than looking at it as a full stop somewhere, everything is work in progress right now. So yes, cryptocurrency is there. Yes, other use cases are there, but we think it's going to change over time, and it's going to go faster and faster. In that sense, a lot of Malaysian involvement in terms of government comes from everywhere. The Ministry of Health is looking at how to manage the supply chain for medicines and all these things using blockchain. Right now, they're testing it. And then the Ministry of Education has adopted, using blockchain for certifications of the public universities. Then I think one of the most important steps, the starting step for Malaysian government has been being one of the earliest country that actually drive the TC307, International Standards Organization, on blockchain and DLT. That's very important for emerging economies like us because the standards set there is going to have a lot of impact on trade facilitation and stuff, which is a huge thing that has to be managed by government. So in terms of working with industry, MIND is one of the agencies. We have also MDAC. And, from the government perspective, we look at the jobs and the economic impact of the technology for us. So one of the ways that we have started working on this is that we work with organizations like Access Malaysia, and we work with Khazanah, subsidiary in JB, to provide a near center, for Singapore. So if you want a lower cost place, you can, we have the option in Iskandar, and they're going to bring people there on Friday. You're most welcome, anybody who wants to see Iskandar and what we have to offer. So these are the kind of things, because we think where we've identified the two things that are very important is regulation is one, and the other one is talent. I think everybody has that problem, but we have to do something about it. And that's probably one of the early steps that we started as a government. Thank you.
Thank you. Jopin?
All right. Well, the Philippines is second in terms of size of population in the whole of ASEAN. The biggest, of course, is Indonesia, and we have more than 100 million people. So you can imagine we are a very big consumer market. And more than 10% of our people are based outside of the country, and they send home billions and billions of dollars to the country. So very obvious use case is financial sector. And our central bank, I mentioned earlier that they are working very closely with the other institutions and private sector in the Philippines, has been encouraging development of use cases under the umbrella of the National Retail Payment System. Right now, if you believe the central bank, we have 7% electronic transactions for all purchases or transactions, financial transactions in the Philippines. But if you look at more conservative studies, non-government studies, we would only be at 1%. So look at the Philippines and other ASEAN countries as a new frontier. Basically, maybe it's the lost frontier when it comes to blockchain opportunities, because investors are flocking there to convert, to do digital transformation and take advantage of all this. So that's one, financial. Second is, this area, I'm not just talking about the Philippines, but where we are right now, we're very into agribusiness, agriculture and business combined. So we're also heavily doing research and encouraging activities to use blockchain technology in agribusiness, from processing, from sourcing to food safety management, even development of biotech, all under the umbrella of agribusiness. And finally, tourism is a major business sector in all of ASEAN as well, and in the Philippines. So that's another sector where we have a lot of use cases when it comes to blockchain and crypto.
Thank you so much, Jopin. And as you rightly pointed out, in large parts of both ASEAN as well as South Asia, financial inclusion still continues to be, a real aspirational statement, and financial exclusion is a problem statement. So how blockchain can solve for it in terms of micropayments, more seamless and cheaper, faster remittances, great articulation of use cases relevant to your markets. I also like the way all five of you, in some way or at least four of you, RIKA, you are not directly in government, tried to pitch your respective countries as welcoming business and crypto destinations. So it's a very heartening sign. I know we are almost towards the end of time, but Jason, I know you have some very progressive thoughts on STOs, and that's really the, the big thing going into 2019. Please care to, share and elaborate on your thoughts, your vision, and what you plan for this space.
Yeah, I want to spend a few minutes talking about securities token and what's going to happen in this space. So some people are quite pessimistic about securities token, and it seems that SEC is putting a pretty tight control. And I had a chat with RIKA. Actually, I agree with RIKA. It's actually a very good attitude with SEC already, and I feel because we are now at a threshold or on the cusp of this industry to transform. Because for the last 12 to 18 months, it was mostly securities token and ICO, and there's a bit of irrationality and a bit of loss of senses what's happening there. But with a security token, this industry can officially or gradually normalize itself. And as the industry matures, I feel it's important for the legacy money or the old money to come in to develop solutions, products, and services with this technology. And we're looking at probably, accredited investors or institutional investors start working, developing products, derivatives, and solutions and services for this industry for three purposes. Number one is for financial inclusion. And I feel, for the industries that's coming in, it's important to understand the fundamental value for blockchain and Bitcoin is to provide an alternative means for financial dignity. So if we can bear that in mind when we create product and services, we can almost adhere to the Satoshi's vision. So with that being said, I am now working to propose a STO bill in Taiwan for Taiwan to become the first country to provide regulatory regime for the securities tokens. And this will come out in the Q2 next year with other complementary measures that already been set up, including for the creation of a new business categories. So I feel there's a huge opportunities awaiting in front of us. And I think we should all work together to create sound system for the business and for the legacy money, for the legacy industry, and help them transform. And I think we are in such an important juncture in history, and all of us hold a key to create the future, and that's all work together. And I would like to offer the all of your comments to my draft of the security token bill, and I would like to get your feedback on how we can get better and improve on this this very, very important opportunity that is presenting itself in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jason. And I think I would have loved to continue, but the clock is ticking. We are already ahead of time. It's been very clear talking to all of you that blockchain is not going to go away. The crypto winter is just all in our heads. In fact, if anything, it's at a tipping point. It's at the cusp of new, more mature beginnings. We've really brought that to life with all five of you. So thank you so much for such candid perspectives that you were able to share publicly. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for my five fabulous panelists. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Another round of applause, please, for our amazing panelists. Thank you so much, Malik.